The sky was painted in hues of fire and twilight. As sunset, the great dragon queen soared over the battle-scarred lands. The war of dragonkind had raged for moons, shaking the heavens with fire and thunder, but at last her clan stood victorious. The enemy had been driven back, their banners burned to embers in the howling winds. Now all that remained was the journey home, to the cliffs of glory, where the tale of their triumph would be etched into legend. As they flew, the warriors of her clan bore the marks of war. Scorched wings, broken horns, and weary eyes told the story of battles fought, of dragons lost, and of the price of victory. Yet none faltered, for with every beat of their mighty wings, they felt the call of home. The cliffs of glory, their sanctuary, awaited them beyond the horizon. Sunset led the flight, her golden armor now darkened with soot and battle scars. She had fought at the heart of the war, her fire scorching the skies, her talons raking through foes who dared to challenge her reign. But victory was not without cost. Many of their kin had fallen, and though they had won, they carried the weight of those lost. As the wind howled through the mountain peaks, Stormclaw, her most trusted warrior, flew to her side. "The battle is won, my queen, Stals," he said, his voice strong despite the fatigue in his wings. "But what now? What becomes of us when there are no more wars to fight?" Sunset gazed at him, her golden eyes reflecting the fading sun. "Now we build," she said. "Now we heal." The war of dragonkind had ended, but their story was only beginning. When the cliffs of glory finally came into view, a roar of triumph echoed through the skies. Towering spires of stone, kissed by the last light of day, stood untouched by war. The vast caverns within were warm, safe, and waiting for their return. Sunset landed first, her claws scraping against the smooth rock as she inhaled the familiar air. One by one the warriors followed, some collapsing in exhaustion, others lifting their heads to the sky in silent gratitude. They had come home, but the work was not done. The war had taken much from them, and now they would rebuild. They would honor those who had fallen, carve their names into the stone, and forge a future where no war would touch their skies again. As the night fell, the fires of their kin lit the cliffs in golden light, and songs of victory rose into the heavens. The wounds of war would take time to fade, but they would never forget. Sunset stood at the edge of the highest peak, gazing into the distance where the war had been fought. She had led them to victory, not for conquest, but for survival. And now, as the stars shimmered above, she vowed that the cliffs of glory would stand forever as a beacon of strength, unity, and the undying spirit of dragonkind. And so, the tale of Sunset and her clan would be told for generations, carried on the wind, whispered through the mountains, and sung in the voices of dragons yet to come. For legends never fade. They soar. The war had lasted 10 long years, a storm of fire, steel, and blood that had scorched the skies and shattered the earth. When it was finally over, when the last enemy banner had been reduced to ash, and the last war cry had faded into silence, only the strongest remained. Sunset led them home. Her wings, once brilliant and strong, bore the scars of 1,000 battles. Her golden armor, once shining, was dented and charred. The warriors who followed were battered and bruised, weary beyond words. But they were alive, and that was all that mattered. The sacred cliffs stood waiting for them, untouched by war yet forever changed. The home they had left behind was in ruins. Caves collapsed, perches broken, the great nesting grounds hollow and empty. Yet they did not weep. They were survivors, Days turned to weeks as they began their work. The wounded were tended to first. Healers worked tirelessly, mending torn wings and scorched scales. Those too weak to fly rested in the caverns, whispering stories of the fallen so they would not be forgotten. Then came the task of rebuilding. The dragons worked as one, claws shaping stone, wings lifting rubble, fire forging anew. They reinforced the perches where younglings would once again roost. They carved deep into the cliffs, creating vast halls where future generations would gather. The winds carried the sounds of their labor, a song of survival echoing through the mountains. The war had stolen much from them, but it had not taken their spirit. Seasons passed, and with each sunrise the clan grew stronger. Hatchlings were born, their eyes bright with the fire of their ancestors. The wounded learned to fly again. Warriors trained in the sky, their movements once slow and pained, now swift and powerful. Sunset stood atop the highest peak, watching them. 10 years of war had shaped them into something greater. They were no longer just a clan. They were the guardians of the sacred cliffs, and they would never fall again. As the final stone was placed and the last warrior was healed, Sunset called her dragons to the heart of the cliffs. The fires burned high, their light reflecting in the eyes of every survivor. "We have rebuilt. We have healed." Her voice carried across the peaks, steady and strong. "And now, we stand ready once more. Never again shall our home be taken. Never again shall war reach these cliffs. We are the watchers, the protectors, the keepers of the sacred cliffs." A mighty roar rose into the heavens, shaking the very earth beneath them. The oath had been made. From that day forth, Sunset and her dragon stood not just as warriors, but as legends, the eternal guardians of their home, the unbreakable survivors of the war of dragonkind. For 10 years they had fought. For many more, they had healed. And now they stood unchallenged, ready to meet any who dared threaten the sacred cliffs ever again. For dragons do not fall, they rise. The war had long since ended, and the sacred cliffs stood strong once more. The dragons had healed, their bodies no longer bearing the wounds of battle, though the memories still lingered in their hearts. But time had a way of mending even the deepest scars, and as the winds grew warmer, a new season arrived. Nesting season. It was the first since the war. For 10 years the skies had been filled with the sounds of battle cries and the clash of talons. But now the winds carried new sounds, the gentle hum of mothers, the soft crackling of eggs, and the eager chirps of new life. Sunset stood upon the highest peak, watching the miracle unfold below her. Her dragons had survived the flames of war, and now they would thrive. Deep within the cliffs, the nesting caverns were alive with activity. Mothers curled protectively around their eggs, warming them with the soft glow of their fire. Fathers stood guard at the entrances, their eyes sharp, ever watchful for danger. It was tradition that no dragon would fly alone during nesting season. Even in times of peace, the instinct to protect the next generation burned fiercely within them. The younglings would be the future, the new guardians of the cliffs, the ones who would carry their legacy forward. And so, the warriors patrolled the skies in formation, their massive wings casting shadows over the lands below. The healers roamed the nests, tending to mothers growing weak from the long days of keeping their eggs warm. It was a season of vigilance and renewal. The first egg cracked on the 7th sunrise of the new season. A small golden snout pushed through the shell, followed by bright, unblinking eyes that glowed like embers. A new life had emerged, untouched by the horrors of war, born into a world of strength and security. A roar of celebration echoed through the cliffs. One by one, the eggs began to hatch, filling the air with the sounds of tiny wings and eager, hungry chirps. The nesting grounds, once a place of sorrow and rebuilding, were now filled with laughter and joy. The elders whispered that it was a sign, a promise from the ancestors that their legacy would endure. As the weeks passed, the hatchlings grew stronger. Their tiny wings fluttered as they attempted their first flights, their claws clumsily scraping against the stone as they chased each other through the cliffs. They did not yet understand the history they were born into, the sacrifices that had been made for them to be here. But one day, they would. One day, they would learn the stories of the War of Dragonkind. One day, they would take the oath of the guardians of the sacred cliffs. For now, they were simply new wings upon the wind, young and free, watched over by those who had fought for their future. Sunset closed her eyes and listened to the sounds of life all around her. They had fought. They had healed. Now they would rise again, and the sacred cliffs would never be empty again. The sun rose over the sacred cliffs, casting golden light upon the towering peaks where dragons had nested for generations. The war was now a distant memory, spoken of only in hushed tones by the elders. This was an era of learning, of growth, and of new beginnings. The hatchlings of the first nesting season had grown into young drakes, their wings strong enough to carry them through the skies, their fire beginning to awaken within them. Now it was time for them to train, explore, and take their place among their kind. The morning air was filled with anticipation as the young dragons gathered on the edge of the sky, a high ledge overlooking the valley below. Their teachers, battle-hardened warriors turned mentors, watched them carefully, their keen eyes studying each young dragon's movements. "Your wings are ready," Andraste called Stormclaw, one of Sunset's most trusted warriors. His silver scales glistened in the morning sun. "Now prove it." One by one, the younglings stepped forward. Some launched themselves boldly into the sky, their wings catching the air with ease. Others hesitated, glancing back at their elders for reassurance. A young, golden dragon, Ember, spread his wings, but hesitated at the edge. I'm not ready," he muttered. Sunset herself approached, lowering her head to his level. "You will never know unless you try," she said gently. "The sky does not wait for those who fear it." Taking a deep breath, Ember leapt. For a moment he plummeted, wings flailing, before catching the wind. The moment his wings steadied, his fear melted away. He was flying. The cliffs erupted with roars of approval, the elders nodding in satisfaction. The young dragons were becoming one with the sky. With wings mastered, the next lesson was fire. In the heart of the fire hollow, a sacred place where molten lava flowed beneath ancient stone, the young dragons gathered. Their fire had awakened, but it was wild, untamed. They needed to learn control. A powerful dragoness named Blazefang, whose fire had once turned the tide of war, stood before them. "Fire is not just destruction," she rumbled, her eyes fierce. "It is light, it is warmth, it is power. Use it without thought, and you will destroy. Use it with wisdom, and you will command." One by one, the young dragons stepped forward to test their flames. Some sputtered small sparks, frustrated at their lack of control. Others unleashed mighty bursts of flame, charring the stone around them. The lesson was patience, balance, and restraint. Ember, still glowing from his success in flight, stepped forward. He inhaled deeply, feeling the heat rise from within, then released a stream of fire, not wild but precise. Blazefang nodded in approval. "You will become strong." Months passed, and the young dragons grew into warriors. Their wings were no longer clumsy, their fire no longer reckless. They had learned, they had trained, and now they were ready. Under the full moon, they gathered at the summit of ancients, where every dragon before them had taken their oath. Sunset herself stood before them, her golden armor polished once more, her gaze proud. "You are the future," she said. "You are the next guardians of the sacred cliffs. Today you take the oath. Today you become one with those who came before you." The young dragons stood tall, their eyes blazing like the fires within them. "We will protect the sky," they roared in unison. "We will guard the sacred cliffs. We will honor those who came before, and we will never fall." The night shook with the power of their voices. The future had arrived. The dragons of the sacred cliffs were no longer just survivors. They were warriors. They were guardians, and they would soar for generations to come.